On the 1st of August, 2008, 29 climbers set out to summit K2. By noon on the 2nd of August, 11 of them would be dead, not from an avalanche, not from a storm, from a chain of events where each death followed directly from the one before it. A man unclipped from the rope and fell. A porter was sent to retrieve his body and died too. An ice serac collapsed onto the fixed lines. A husband was killed right before his wife's eyes, standing just meters away. 4 people hung upside down through the night at 8,000 meters. An Irishman spent roughly 3 hours cutting them free from the ropes. He got them all out. Shortly after, the serac collapsed again, taking both those who had just been rescued and the man who rescued them. 11 dead in 36 hours. The mountain never gave back a single body. K2 is the second highest peak on Earth, 8,611 meters. But it's not about the height. By 2008, K2 was considered the deadliest mountain among all 8,000ers. 1 in 4 people who attempted the climb died here. The main trap sits at roughly 8,200 meters. It's called the bottleneck, a narrow, steep couloir squeezed between rock walls and a massive ice overhang, a serac. The serac looms over the route like the overhang of a building. It can collapse at any moment, in an hour, in a day, in a minute. There's no way to predict it. Everyone passing through the bottleneck walks directly beneath it. In the summer of 2008, several international expeditions gathered at K2 base camp. Norwegians, Koreans, Serbians, the Dutch Norrit team, French climbers, and Italian solo alpinist, Americans. The teams decided to pool their efforts for a summit push on August 1st. The plan was simple. An advance team would head out at night, fix ropes through the bottleneck and the traverse, and the rest would follow. The leader of the advance team was Pakistani climber Shaheen Baig. Among all 29 people heading for the summit, he was the only one who had already stood on the top of K2, the only one who knew the route by heart. But on the night before the push, Shaheen felt symptoms of altitude sickness and was forced to descend. The advance team left without him, 75 minutes behind schedule. Without Shaheen, no one knew exactly where to start fixing ropes. The lines were set too low, wasted on easy ground near Camp 4, and by the time they reached the traverse and the upper bottleneck, there wasn't enough rope left. No one knew yet that this mistake would determine everything that followed. On the morning of August 1st, climbers ascending from Camp 4 found the fixed ropes in the wrong place. The lines ended well below the key section. A bottleneck formed inside the bottleneck, dozens of people on a single narrow slope, each clipped to the same rope. Some waited, some tried to pass others. Time slipped away. The turnaround deadline for the summit was 4 in the afternoon. After that, descending in darkness becomes nearly impossible. Serbian climber Dren Mandic decided to overtake Norwegian Cecilia Skog. To do so, he unclipped from the fixed rope. For a moment, he was completely unprotected on a steep ice slope. He lost his balance. His body flew hundreds of meters down the couloir. Eyewitnesses saw him rise for a second, then fall again and go still. The first death, and the day had barely begun. Pakistani high-altitude porter Jahan Baig, sharing a surname with Shaheen, but a different man entirely, descended to recover Mandic's body. On the way down, he lost his footing. Over the radio, someone heard, "Let go of the rope! Let go of the rope!" Then silence. Baig fell into the abyss. 2 people dead within hours, and every other climber had witnessed both deaths. Logic, cold calculation. Every rule in the book said the same thing: turn around and go down. But the summit was so close, yet no one turned back. That decision, to keep going after 2 deaths, would later become the central focus of every investigation into the disaster. Pemba Gyalje, the Sherpa for the Norrit team, would later say, "If everyone had turned around after Mandic's fall, only 1 person would have died. But in that moment, no one turned around." The safe summit window on K2 runs from 2 to 4 in the afternoon. That leaves enough daylight for the descent through the bottleneck. On August 1st, 2008, 18 people reached the summit between 5 in the evening and 7:30, 2 to 4 hours past the deadline. Among them was Gerard MacDonald, a 37-year-old engineer from Limerick. He became the first Irishman in history to summit K2. MacDonald was climbing with the Dutch Norrit team alongside Wilco van Rooyen and Pemba Gyalje. 3 Korean climbers also stood on the summit: Park Kyung-hyo, Kim Hyo-geong, and Hwang Dong-jin, together with Nepali Sherpa Jumik Bhoti. Norwegians Rolf Bay and his wife, Cecilia Skog, were there too. The couple took photos on the summit. When the descent began, Rolf went first and told Lars Nessa, "Look after my wife." Within hours, he would be gone. Everyone began their descent in the fading light. Ahead lay the traverse beneath the serac and the bottleneck. The ropes fixed that morning were the only way down. Around 8 in the evening, the serac collapsed. A block of ice the size of a house broke away from the ice field and swept across the traverse directly above the bottleneck. It severed every fixed rope that had been set that morning. This was the first collapse. Over the next 24 hours, the serac would collapse again. Rolf Bay was on the traverse at that moment. He was swept away. Cecilia Skog stood just meters from her husband on the same rope. She watched him disappear. She survived. The third member of the Norwegian team, Lars Nessa, the very man Rolf had asked to look after his wife, helped Cecilia descend. She was in shock, but she kept moving. In her backpack, Cecilia happened to have a spare 100-meter Kevlar rope. They used it to descend through the bottleneck and left it anchored for those still above. A woman who had just lost her husband was thinking about strangers higher up on the mountain. Everyone above the collapse was now trapped. No fixed ropes. Darkness. Altitude above 8,000 meters. The death zone. Every hour up there, the body breaks down. The brain swells, the lungs fill with fluid, the muscles shut down. Descending through the bottleneck now meant moving down steep ice in the dark, with no fixed lines, no rope, no protection. Frenchman Hugues Dobered, 61 years old, one of the oldest members of the summit push, attempted to descend in the dark. He slipped and fell. The fourth death. Pakistani porter Karim Meherban vanished somewhere on the route that same night. What exactly happened to him was never established. The fifth death. That same night, cheering Dorje Sherpa, who had summited without supplemental oxygen, dozed off on a rocky ledge above the bottleneck. He woke in total darkness. Nearby, he found Sherpa Pasang Lama, who had lost his ice axe and couldn't move. Chiring tied him to his own harness. Together, they descended a 60-degree ice slope with a single ice axe and no ropes. When they slipped, Chiring drove the axe into the ice and arrested the fall for both of them. They made it to camp alive. By dawn, 5 were dead, and people remained on the mountain who could neither climb up nor get down. With the first light of August 2nd, Italian Marco Confortola and Irishman McDonald began descending along the traverse. What they saw stopped them both. On the ice wall, tangled in ropes, 4 people hung upside down. 3 Korean climbers and Sherpa Jumik Bhoti. They were alive. They had spent the entire night in that position, in temperatures below -30, at an altitude above 8,000 meters. The ropes were so twisted and knotted that untangling them at that altitude was a task at the very edge of what's humanly possible. Hands wouldn't obey, fingers wouldn't bend. Every movement demanded effort that barely existed at that height. Confortola would later claim he tried to help, but photographs contradicted his account. Confortola headed down. McDonald stayed. For about 3 hours, the Irishman worked on that wall. He untangled the ropes and freed them one by one. Pemba Gyalje watched from below and took photographs. Those images would later become the key evidence of what happened on the traverse that morning. While McDonald worked above, another Nepali climber was ascending from below, Pasang Bhoti. He was Jumik's cousin. He climbed without supplemental oxygen upward into the death zone to save his relative. McDonald freed the last of the trapped climbers. Pasang found his cousin and the freed Koreans alive. He radioed down, found them. The group tried to regroup and begin the descent. Within minutes of McDonald finishing the rescue, the serac collapsed again, this time on the morning of August 2nd. A mass of ice broke away from the ice field and swept across the traverse. It took everyone: McDonald, the 3 Korean climbers he had just freed, Jumik Bhoti, who had hung from the ropes all night, and Pasang Bhoti, who had climbed up for his cousin. 6 people killed at once: the rescuer and the rescued, the one who came for family and those he came for. The total death toll reached 11. It was the deadliest day in the history of K2. Wilco van Rooyen was still on the mountain. During the descent on August 1st, he had lost his contact lenses, gone nearly blind from hypoxia, and wandered off route onto the south face, a place where no one goes. He spent the first night without shelter, without water, without an ice axe. He was presumed dead. Then a second night. Then his wife in the Netherlands received a call from a satellite phone. The voice was barely audible, but it was Wilco. Using the call data, the team determined his approximate location. On August 3rd, Pemba Gyalje and Dutchman Cas van de Gevel, a Norrit teammate, went searching. They found Van Rooyen by the sound of a ringing phone. He was lying on the south face, frostbitten but alive. The three of them made it to Camp 3 deep in the night. Van Rooyen became the first person in history to survive 2 nights on K2 without shelter. Doctors amputated all his toes. Confortola also lost toes to frostbite. Cheering Dorje Sherpa, who saved Pasang Lama that night, received the Tenzing Norgay Award and honorary membership in the Explorers Club. Pemba Gyalje spent 90 hours in the death zone, nearly 4 full days. The National Geographic Society named him Adventurer of the Year. He also provided the photographs that changed the understanding of what happened on the Traverse. Marco Confortola had been first in front of the cameras. He held a press conference at Milan airport and claimed he had tried to help those hanging on the wall, while McDonnell had wandered off disoriented. That version became the official story until Pemba came back from the mountain. His photographs and radio recordings disproved everything. It was McDonnell who spent hours freeing the people hanging on that wall. None of the 11 bodies were ever found. Cecilia Skog, who lost her husband on that traverse, crossed Antarctica unsupported 2 years later, the first woman ever to do so. Summer of 1986. K2, 8,611 meters. 9 expeditions simultaneously assault the second highest summit on the planet. By mid-July, 6 are already dead. Avalanche, falls, a crevasse on a flat glacier. But the worst begins in August, when 7 climbers find themselves trapped at Camp 4 at 8,000 meters. 5 days of storm. No food, no water, no way down. What happens to the human body and mind when everything runs out at that altitude? Everything except the wind? At the base of K2, a tent city sprawls across the ice. 9 expeditions from different countries. Americans, French, Poles, Italians, Austrians, British, Koreans, all camped on the Baltoro Glacier at the same time. K2 has never seen a crowd like this. Just 238 meters lower than Everest, but in terms of danger, a completely different league. By this point, the mountain has claimed around 40 lives throughout its entire climbing history. 1 in 4 who attempted the summit never came back. The teams are targeting different routes. Some go for the classic Abruzzi Ridge, a relatively well-known path along the southeast spur. Others tackle unclimbed walls and ridges, the Magic Line on the south-southwest buttress, the south face, the northwest ridge. There is no unified leadership between the expeditions. Each operates on its own plan, its own timeline, its own ambitions. Base camp has a life of its own. Climbers from different countries share water, exchange weather forecasts, help each other with load carries. For now, the mood in camp is businesslike. The weather is fickle, but that is normal for the Karakoram. No one standing at the foot of K2 right now can imagine that this season will become the deadliest in the mountain's history. On June 21st, a rock breaks loose from the ridge above Camp 2 and triggers a snow avalanche on the Negrado Wall. Americans John Smolich and Alan Pennington are caught in its path. Both die. Their expedition from Washington and Oregon came here for the Magic Line, one of the most technically demanding routes on K2, never completed before. Pennington's body is pulled out by climbers who witnessed the slide. Smolich's body is never found. Base camp takes its first blow, but the season is just beginning. 2 days later, on June 23rd, Polish climber Wanda Rutkiewicz reaches the summit of K2. She becomes the first woman in history to stand on top of this mountain. That same day, half an hour apart, the French arrive at the summit, Liliane and Maurice Berard and Michel Parmentier, all without supplemental oxygen. The ascent goes cleanly. Parmentier descends safely. The problems begin with the Berards. On June 24th, the Berards start their descent from a bivouac at 8,300 meters. A storm hits. Visibility drops to 0. Rutkiewicz looks back and sees 2 silhouettes slowly trudging through the blizzard. This is the last time anyone sees Liliane and Maurice alive. A month later, Korean climbers will discover Liliane's body at 5,330 meters, nearly 3 kilometers below where she vanished. Maurice's body will not be found until 12 years later, in 1998, on the glacier above base camp. 10 days into the season, 4 dead. On July 8th, Polish climbers Jerzy Kukuczka and Tadeusz Piotrowski reach the summit of K2 via the south face. It is the first ascent of a route climbers call the Polish line, and Reinhold Messner calls it madness. 2 days on the wall without food or water. 2 open bivouacs above 8,000 meters. The climb succeeds, but now they have to get down. Kukuczka and Piotrowski descend via the Abruzzi Ridge. There is no other option. Their route is impassable in reverse. On July 10th, at roughly 7,900 meters, Piotrowski loses both crampons on an icy section. Without crampons on ice, that is a death sentence. He slides downward, shoots past Kukuczka, who cannot stop him. After 100 meters, the slope drops off a cliff. Piotrowski disappears over the edge. The Polish line route has never been repeated. 6 days later, July 16th, Italian climber Renato Casarotto is returning to base camp after his 3rd solo attempt on the south-southwest ridge. 3 times he climbed above 8,000 meters alone. 3 times he turned back. Now he is roughly an hour's walk from the tents. A snow bridge on the Godwin-Austen Glacier collapses beneath him. Casarotto falls 40 meters into a crevasse. He pulls a radio from his pack and whispers to his wife Goretta, who is waiting at base camp. "Goretta, I am dying in a crevasse near base camp." Rescuers from several expeditions reach him and haul him to the surface. Casarotto tries to take a few steps, collapses onto his pack, and dies from internal injuries. By mid-July, 6 are dead. August has not even begun. On August 3rd, 3 South Korean climbers reach the summit of K2 via the Abruzzi Ridge. They are the only ones this season using supplemental oxygen. That same day, the Polish-Czechoslovak trio, Wojciech Wroz, Przemysław Piasecki, and Peter Bozik, completes the first ascent of the Magic Line. The descent down the Abruzzi drags on until dark. Wroz slides off the end of a fixed rope and dies, the 7th victim of the season. Shortly before that, a rockfall on the Abruzzi Ridge kills Pakistani climber Muhammad Ali, the Sirdar of the Korean expedition, number 8. And at Camp 4, at roughly 8,000 meters, those preparing for a summit push are gathering. British climber Alan Rouse, the leader of his expedition, one of the strongest technical alpinists of his generation. The first Briton to summit Janu, Nuptse, and Broad Peak. On K2, his team failed on the northwest ridge, and Rouse switched to the Abruzzi. Beside him, Polish climber Dobrosława Miodowicz-Wolf, whom everyone calls Mroka, the Ant. Small, wiry, incredibly tough. The year before, she soloed Nanga Parbat to 8,050 meters, came within about 75 meters of the summit, and turned around. Austrians Willi Bauer, Alfred Imitzer, and Hannes Wieser, a seasoned team. 54-year-old Kurt Diemberger, a living legend. The only person on the planet to have made first ascents of 2 8,000ers. With him, 47-year-old British filmmaker Julie Tullis, a cinematographer, the first woman to shoot films at extreme altitude. They have been working together for several years and call themselves the highest film team in the world. On August 4th, around 5:30 in the morning, Rouse and Mroka leave the tents at Camp 4. Behind them, Imitzer, then Tullis and Diemberger. Last to start are Bauer and Wieser. Wieser turns back after 100 meters. He feels his fingers going numb and makes the call not to risk it. Mroka pushes to 8,500 meters, but her strength runs out. The summit is just over 100 meters of vertical above her. She turns around. Bauer and Imitzer reach the summit of K2 around 3:30 in the afternoon. Rouse catches up and stands on the highest point at 4 o'clock. He is the first Briton in history on the summit of K2. Tullis and Diemberger reach the top last, 5:30 in the evening. This is critically late. The sun is already setting, and darkness awaits them on the descent. They begin to descend, but Tullis stumbles. The rope connecting her to Diemberger goes taut, and both go sliding down. Roughly 100 meters of falling. By some miracle, they stop short of a drop-off. Both are alive, but badly battered. They spend the night on the open slope at 8,400 meters, without a tent, without sleeping bags, at -30. By the morning of August 5th, Diemberger and Toulis drag themselves back to Camp 4 on the last of their strength. Now there are 7 here, everyone who climbed and everyone who turned back. They do not know they have just walked into a trap. The storm slams into K2 on August 5th and does not stop. Wind exceeds 160 kilometers per hour. Snow comes down like a wall. Temperature drops below -30. The tents at Camp 4 crack and tear. Going outside is impossible. The wind knocks you off your feet instantly. 7 are trapped at 8,000 meters. Rouse, Tullis, Diemberger, Moroka, Bauer, Imitzer, Wieser. Food is calculated for a day, maybe 2. Stove fuel runs out fast, and without fuel, there is no way to melt snow. At this altitude, the body loses several liters of fluid per day, through breathing, through sweat, through the dry, thin air. Without water, the body starts to fail. At 8,000 meters, dehydration is more dangerous than cold. During the night between August 6th and 7th, Julie Toulis loses her vision. This is a sign of severe high-altitude edema. She quietly falls asleep next to Diemberger and does not wake up. She is 47 years old. The autobiography she finished before the expedition, Clouds from Both Sides, will become her final book. Rouse is still alive, but his body is giving out. He starts to hallucinate, stops eating, slips into delirium. When he comes to, he can no longer speak. The remaining 5 lie in the tents, listening to the howling wind, and they understand. If the storm does not end in the next few hours, Camp 4 will become their grave. August 8th and 9th. The wind keeps tearing at the tent fabric. Help from below is impossible. No one will climb up to them in a storm like this. Morning of August 10th. Day 5 at 8,000 meters. The storm eases slightly. It does not stop, but the wind dies down a little. This is the only chance. Diemberger and Moroka approach Rouse. He is delirious and cannot stand. They try to lift him, but he does not respond. The decision that will haunt the survivors for the rest of their lives. Leaving Rouse in the tent. Alone. Dying. Bauer, Wieser, Imitzer, and Moroka begin the descent. Diemberger goes separately. A few hundred meters below Camp 4, Wieser sinks into the snow and does not get up again. Imitzer lies down beside him. 5 days without water or food at 8,000 meters have left them with nothing. They can no longer move. Moroka keeps descending. Bauer keeps going. Diemberger slowly crawls down alone. At roughly 7,100 meters, between the second and third camps, Moroka loses consciousness, falls, and dies. Of the 7 trapped at Camp 4, 2 remain alive. Bauer descends to base camp on his own, 2,700 meters down the wrecked route. Diemberger makes it to Camp 2, but can go no further. He is found by British photographer Jim Curran and Polish climbers, who bring him down. On August 16th, both are evacuated by helicopter. Both have severe frostbite. Both lose fingers on their hands and toes on their feet. The final toll of the 1986 season on K2. 13 dead. Nearly 1 in 2 of those who attempted the mountain. Diemberger will write The Endless Knot, one of the most harrowing accounts in the history of mountaineering. Jim Curran will write K2, Triumph and Tragedy. Both survivors will live long lives, but neither will ever climb an 8,000er again. On the evening of August 13th, 1995, 6 climbers stand on the summit of K2, the most dangerous mountain on the planet. Among them is a woman who conquered Everest solo 3 months earlier, and a rock climber for whom this is his first ascent above 7,000 meters. They climbed without oxygen, without porters, without a single leader. The time is 7 in the evening. The shelter is hours away through the darkness, and from the north, a storm with winds exceeding 160 kilometers per hour is already bearing down on the mountain. After leaving the summit, not one of the 6 will ever make radio contact again. Of the entire group that set out for the top that night, only those who turned back before reaching the summit will return. K2 stands on the border of Pakistan and China, in the very heart of the Karakoram. 8,611 meters, the second highest peak on the planet, and, by mid-90s statistics, the deadliest. Roughly 1 in 4 who reach the summit never comes back. In the summer of 1995, several expeditions are working on the mountain simultaneously, but K2 offers not a single stable weather window. Weeks are spent waiting. Storms roll in one after another, pushing teams back down. Among those waiting is Alison Hargreaves, a 33-year-old British woman. 3 months earlier, she became the first woman in history to climb Everest solo, without oxygen and without Sherpa support. Her plan for the year is 3 of the world's highest mountains in a single season, unsupported. K2 is the second step, but behind the ambition lies a pressure invisible from the summit. Her husband has closed their climbing gear shop. The family is deep in debt. Alison is the sole breadwinner. She needs results to keep her sponsors. Beside her on the mountain is Rob Slater, a 34-year-old American. In the world of rock climbing, his name carries weight. A pioneer of the hardest routes on El Capitan, the first and only person to have climbed all the Fisher Towers in Utah. In everyday life, he is a trader, works on the stock exchange, accustomed to measuring risk in numbers, but all his mastery lies on rock faces and walls. K2 is his first 8,000er. Before this, he had never climbed above 7,000 meters. He spent 2 years preparing for this expedition, considering it the defining event of his life. Both teams spend weeks on the mountain, climbing and retreating. By early August, patience and resources are running out. On the 6th of August, porters arrive at base camp to escort the American expedition out. The team packs up. Everyone leaves, everyone except Slater. He refuses to go and decides to join the New Zealanders. For a man who spent 2 years preparing for this mountain, leaving without an attempt is unthinkable. By this point, Hargreaves has climbed twice to Camp 3 and once to Camp 4, just under 8,000 meters. Each time, bad weather forced her back. She missed an early weather window that her fellow Briton Alan Hinckeys took advantage of. He summited and went home while Alison was still waiting below. As he left, Hincks would later write that he departed base camp with an uneasy feeling. Still on the mountain is another strong group, a Spanish expedition from Aragon. 7 people from 2 clubs, nearly all with Himalayan experience. Javier Escartin had climbed Hidden Peak by a new route. Lorenzo Ortiz had stood on the summit of Nanga Parbat. Javier Olivar and Fernando Ortaz had worked as rope partners on previous Himalayan expeditions, and team leader Pipe Garces had climbed Everest. They work methodically, camp by camp, acclimatization, rotation by rotation. On August 9th, 6 of the Spaniards leave base camp for their final attempt. Along the way, one of them, Manuel Anson, realizes he has no strength left and turns back. 5 continue. Separately on the mountain is the New Zealand team led by Peter Hillary, son of Everest's first summiteer. With Hillary are Kim Logan, 22-year-old Bruce Grant, a former Olympic skier and strong climber Matt Komisky, and Canadian Jeff Lakes, Hillary's rope partner. On August 12th, everything converges at a single point. The Spaniards set up Camp 4 on the shoulder, at an altitude of 7,950 meters. That morning, Slater, Hargreaves, and 3 New Zealanders climb up to survey the upper slopes. For the first time in weeks, the weather looks stable. The 3 expeditions agree, a joint summit push, departure at midnight. But this is not a unified team. 3 groups with different experience, different pacing, and different attitudes toward risk. They have no shared leader and no plan for what happens if something goes wrong. At midnight on August 13th, the plan is set in motion. The sky is clear, there is no wind. The Spaniards leave first. Olivar, Escartin, and Ortiz head upward into the darkness. Garces also starts out but quickly realizes his feet are freezing and turns back. On his way down, he runs into Slater, Hargreaves, and Grant climbing up. They had passed Ortis's tent and are now catching up to the Spaniards. Garces returns to Camp 4. Hillary and Lakes leave later than the rest. By noon, 8 people are on the route between 8,200 and 8,300 meters. They climb slowly through the bottleneck, a narrow couloir beneath a massive ice serac, and emerge onto the open traverse. Here, Hillary stops. He sees what the others apparently do not. From the north, a dense wall of cloud is creeping in. Wind is beginning to drive snow squalls across the slopes of K2. Up above, at the exit of the bottleneck, several figures have also stopped, and for a moment Hillary thinks maybe they are having doubts too. But then the figures begin moving upward again. Hillary sits down next to Lakes. They share tea from a thermos and discuss the situation. Everything around them says, keep going. The group is heading up. The summit of K2 is just hours away. Turning back means giving up everything you came here for. But an inner voice says one thing: go down. Hillary remembers the words his father repeated to him since childhood. Never be afraid to stand alone. He tells Lakes he is heading down. Lakes replies that he will continue a bit further to see if the weather improves. Hillary hands him the radio. They shake hands and part ways. Hillary, down into the thickening fog, alone. Lakes, up for a while longer. Soon, Lakes also turns back, short of the summit. But the six, Hargreaves, Slater, Grant, Olivar, Escartin, and Ortiz, continue climbing. While Hillary descends, the six slowly gain altitude. At noon, the Spaniards radio base camp from the 8,400-meter mark. They report, the distant Chinese horizon is clear, absolute calm. From their position, nothing looks alarming. The clouds Hillary saw are, to them, just the usual daytime haze that had come and gone every previous day. The ascent is grueling. At that altitude, there is 3 times less oxygen than at sea level, and every step requires several breaths. The six make their way through the bottleneck using old fixed ropes left by previous expeditions. The Catalan rope in the lower section, the Dutch red rope in the upper. None of them are using supplemental oxygen. None of them hired high-altitude porters. They are counting only on themselves. Down at Camp 4, at 7,950 meters, the wind begins to pick up. Garces and Ortas, sitting in their tents, feel the shift. Anxiety builds. Time is passing, and the group is still somewhere up above. At 6:23 in the evening, the radio at base camp crackles to life. Lorenzo Ortiz is on the line. He asks what time it is. They tell him. A pause, then his voice. Too late. We are on the summit. Ortiz and Grant are the first of the six to stand on the highest point. Minutes later, Olivar reports. He and Hargreaves are on top as well. By 7 in the evening, all 6 are standing on the summit of K2. Below, a brief moment of joy, immediately overtaken by rising dread. 7 in the evening at 8,600 meters means one thing: a descent in total darkness. Camp 4 is hours away along an exposed ridge and across a traverse above the abyss. No shelter, no margin of time. The 6 turn around and begin their descent. They do not know that from the north, something is already heading toward K2, something you cannot hide from on a bare slope. It comes from the north, swift, without warning. The storm slams into the slopes of K2 and within minutes turns the mountain into a trap. Wind accelerates past 160 kilometers per hour. The temperature plummets below -40. Scott Fisher, standing with his expedition on neighboring Broad Peak, will later describe it as a combination of inhuman cold and wind capable of knocking a person off their feet on flat ground. On a 50-degree slope in the dark, at 8,500 meters, the 6 have no chance of holding on. From this moment, not one of them makes radio contact. Not a single voice on the radio. Not a single figure on the slope. The storm engulfs the upper part of the mountain entirely, and the 6, Hargreaves, Slater, Grant, Olivar, Escartin, Ortiz, vanish into it. At Camp 4, at 7,950 meters, Garces and Ortas endure a night they will later call the worst of their lives. The hurricane tears at the tents, forces snow through every gap, howls so loudly they cannot hear each other. They wait, hoping someone from the 6 might make it down to camp. The hours pass. No one comes. Both develop frostbite. Garces on his hands and feet, Ortas on his hands. Hillary, who turned back hours earlier, makes a solo descent through pitch darkness and wind. He loses visibility, loses landmarks, but finds his way down. He survives. Jeff Lakes descends the same route. An avalanche buries his tent at one of the upper camps. He digs himself out, but all his gear is gone. Ice axes, crampons, harness, food, goggles. Lakes tapes strips of adhesive over his eyes as makeshift protection against snow blindness and continues his descent barehanded. From the lower camps, voices on the radio encourage him onward. Hand over hand, meter by meter, he moves through what remains of the route. On the morning of August 14th, a clear, flawless sky rises over K2. Garces and Ortas crawl out of their shredded tents and look up, at the entire upper slope, from the shoulder to the summit ridge. Empty. Not a single moving dot, not a trace, not a sound. Only the white slope and the blue sky. The 6 who left for the summit the previous evening have not returned. There is no more time to wait. The fingers on Garcis's hands and feet have turned black. Ortaz's hands are frostbitten. Between the two of them, one pair of gloves, one ice axe, and a pair of crampons. They begin descending the season route. Somewhere on the approach to Camp 3, a windbreaker jacket appears underfoot. Beside it, a mountaineering boot and a harness. Both recognize the gear instantly. It belongs to Allison Hargreaves. Further below, far down in the snow, a body is visible. They cannot reach it. They have neither the strength nor the equipment. But there is little doubt. She was blown off the mountain. On August 15th, Jeff Lakes reaches Camp 2 on the Abruzzi route. Hillary, Logan, and Komsky are nearby. Lakes crawls into a sleeping bag. They fall asleep. In the morning, Lakes does not wake up. The 3 find his body. They bury him right there, on a narrow ledge at 6,500 meters. Kim Logan says, "We are the survivors, right?" On August 16th, Hillary descends to the base camp of Scott Fisher's expedition on Broad Peak. They train a telescope on the slopes of K2 and slowly, methodically scan every section, from the shoulder to the summit ridge. Nothing. Hillary picks up the radio and relays the news to the outside world. On August 19th, a Pakistani military helicopter evacuates Garces and Ortaz from base camp. The 6 who stood on the summit of K2 on the evening of August 13th never left the mountain. Not a single body was recovered. February 5th, 2021, K2, the Abruzzi route, somewhere below 7,000 meters. A Bulgarian climber with 10 8,000ers under his belt is descending along a fixed rope. Approach the anchor, unclip the safety, reattach below, clip back in, between unclip and clip back in. A few seconds. Atana Skatov doesn't finish this movement. What causes one of the most experienced people on the mountain to lose his balance on a familiar action? And what does a night without a tent at -35 have to do with it? To understand, we need to go back 11 years to when a 32-year-old scientist stepped onto a mountain trail for the first time in his life. Atana Skatov is born in 1978 in Sliven, a small city in eastern Bulgaria. He chooses the path of a scientist, graduates from the Agricultural University of Plovdiv, then earns his doctorate at Humboldt University in Berlin. His specialization, plant protection, entomology. He works as a lecturer and researcher in Bulgaria and Germany. Until the age of 32, he never sets foot in the mountains. He doesn't do sports. He lives the quiet life of a desk-bound academic. Everything changes in the summer of 2010. Skatov steps onto a mountain trail in Bulgaria for the first time. The Kam Emine route, 650 kilometers across the entire country, from the western border to the Black Sea. He completes the route, then comes back, and does it again. 3 years in a row, from 2010 to 2012, he repeats this journey, building his fitness each time. In January 2012, Skatov switches to a fully plant-based diet. That same year, he begins learning mountaineering. He's self-taught. He deliberately avoids studying routes in advance. He'll later explain he wants to feel the spirit of the pioneers. He learns fast. In May 2014, just 4 years after his first hike through the Bulgarian mountains, Atana Skatov stands on the summit of Everest. He's 36. He's the first vegan in history to climb the highest point on the planet. After Everest, Skatov defines a goal that reshapes his entire life. He launches the project Speed Times 14 times 8,000 times Vegan, a plan to summit all 14 8,000ers on Earth within 6 years, fueled entirely by plant-based food. No vegan in the world has ever done this. Skatov wants to prove that a body without animal products can perform at extreme altitude. He picks up a pace that few can sustain. In 2015, Manaslu. In 2016, Annapurna and Makalu. On Makalu, he sets a record. The entire expedition takes just 94 hours with a single overnight in base camp. In 2017, he climbs Lhotse and summits Everest for the second time, now from the south. The Everest plus Lhotse link-up takes 5 days and 12 hours. In June of that same year, Skadov solos Denali in alpine style and completes the 7 Summits program. He's the first Bulgarian and the first vegan to do it. In 2018, Cho Oyu without Sherpas and without supplemental oxygen. In 2019, Skadov hits an incredible pace, 4 8,000ers in a single year. Kangchenjunga, Gasherbrum 1, Gasherbrum 2, Dhaulagiri. By October 2019, he has 10 different 8,000ers behind him. 4 mountains remain. One of them is K2. 2020 breaks all plans. The pandemic shuts down the Himalayas and the Karakoram. Expeditions are canceled one after another. Skadov loses an entire season. His project was planned to wrap up by the end of 2020, but the timeline is no longer possible. He makes a decision that takes him into an entirely different category of risk, to attempt K2 in winter. K2 is the second highest mountain in the world and one of the deadliest. In winter, conditions push beyond the limits of human capability. Temperatures drop below -50. Winds accelerate to 200 kilometers per hour. Before the winter of 2021, no human in history had ever summited K2 during the winter months. Skadov joins the 7 Summit Treks expedition, the largest commercial operation of that season. Before departing for Pakistan, he says, "Of course, it's going to be extremely tough, and only the mountain will decide who makes it up." Dozens of climbers from different countries converge on K2's base camp. On January 16, 2021, history is made. 10 Nepali climbers complete the first ever winter ascent of K2. But the celebration is short-lived. That same day, during the descent from Camp 1, 49-year-old Spanish climber Sergi Mingotes slips and falls to his death. The first casualty of the season. Nearly 3 weeks pass after Mingotes' death. On February 3rd, Skadov and his Sherpa Lakpa Dendi leave base camp and head upward. They ascend through the intermediate camps, overnighting at altitude. The next day, February 4th, they climb to Camp 3, roughly 7,300 meters. From here, teams plan the final push to the summit. But there are already more than 25 people from various expeditions in the camp. There aren't enough tents. People are packed into shelters like sardines in a can. Skadov and Lakpa Dendi are left outside. They spend the night in the open air at roughly -35 degrees, at an altitude where the oxygen content is about 1/3 of normal. A night without a tent at that altitude isn't just discomfort, it's a direct threat to life. The body burns its last reserves on staying warm, muscles stiffen, reactions slow down. Conditions don't allow them to continue the ascent. Skadov decides to retreat. As he prepares to descend, that same night 4 other climbers, Pakistani mountaineer Ali Sadpara, his son Sajid, Chilean Juan Pablo Moore, and Icelander John Snorri, leave Camp 3 and push upward toward the summit. The morning of February 5th, Skadov and Lakpa Dendi begin their descent through the Black Pyramid, a steep rock and ice section of the Abruzzi route, with roughly 500 meters of vertical drop. Descending on fixed ropes here is routine. You approach the anchor point where the rope is secured. Unclip your safety device. Move it below the anchor, clip back in, keep going. Skadov had performed this action hundreds of times in his career, on 10 8,000ers, on countless walls. He's moving a few meters ahead of his Sherpa. At around 10:30 in the morning, Skadov reaches the next transition point. He unclips from the rope to move his safety device below the anchor. In that moment, those few seconds when a climber is attached to nothing, he loses his balance and falls. Further down the slope, on the Black Pyramid, Canadian filmmaker Elia Saikali is descending with his Sherpa. Saikali will later describe the moment. "A body flew right over my head out of nowhere. There was no warning. There were no screams. A body in a bright red down suit hurtles past and slides down the icy slopes of K2. Lakpa Dendi, Skatov's Sherpa, watches his partner disappear. One moment Atanas was here, he'll say later, and the next moment he was gone. The body travels roughly 1,800 meters vertically, down to the level of the advanced base camp at approximately 5,500 meters. The red down suit remains stuck somewhere on the slope above. The first reports reaching base camp speak of a fixed rope breaking, but 7 Summit Treks quickly dismisses this version. Expedition leader Chang Dawa Sherpa states, "We fixed the mountain with new ropes that were not broken." Lakpa Dendi confirms he descended on the very same rope. It was intact. He made a mistake during the transition, the Sherpa says. Video shot by Lakpa just minutes before the fall shows Skadov clipped to the rope and looking confident. What exactly happened at the moment of transition, exhaustion from a night without a tent, slowed reactions from hypoxia, frozen fingers, a split-second loss of focus, is impossible to determine. At 3 in the afternoon that same day, a Pakistani Army helicopter evacuates Skadov's body from 5,500 meters and flies it to Skardu. Atanas Skatov is 42 years old. Behind him are 10 8,000ers, the 7 summits, and a speed record on Makalu. He is one of the most experienced climbers on the mountain that season. That same day, February 5th, while Skadov's body is being evacuated by helicopter, 3 climbers higher on the mountain are fighting for their lives. Ali Sadpara, Juan Pablo Moore, and John Snorri set out for the summit the previous night. Ali's son Sajid turned back due to a failed oxygen system. It's the last time he sees his father. The 3 continue upward, then communication cuts out. Search operations yield nothing. Bad weather prevents helicopters from going higher. Days pass, hope fades. The bodies of Sadpara, Moore, and Snorri won't be found until the following summer, during the summer climbing season. The winter season of K2 2020/2021 enters history twice over. The first ever winter ascent, and 5 dead in a single winter. Mingode, Skatov, Sadpara, Moore, Snorri. K2 becomes the first and only 8,000er to be climbed in winter, but the price is devastating. Skadov, the man who came to the mountains at 32, who in 10 years went from a Bulgarian trail to 10 of the highest summits on Earth, dies performing a routine action he had done countless times. At 7,000 meters, the brain receives 1/3 of its normal oxygen. The hands remember every move, but one day, that's not enough. On July 27, 2023, K2, elevation 8,200 meters. On a narrow traverse above the bottleneck, a man hangs upside down. His stomach is exposed, his mask is torn off, no gloves. He is 27 years old, a porter with no high-altitude experience, and he is not wearing a down suit. He is still alive. A drone films from above as dozens of climbers walk past him toward the summit, one after another, 3 hours. His name is Mohammed Hassan Shigri, and this is how he ended up on that rope. The village of Tizar is tucked away in the mountains of the Shigar district, in the heart of Gilgit-Baltistan. This is where Mohammed Hassan Shigri lives, a 27-year-old father of 3 sons. His mother is seriously ill, struggling to breathe in the local climate, and Hassan wants one thing: to earn enough before winter to move his family somewhere the air is gentler. His childhood friend Basharat would later recall Hassan's words, "All my life I have suffered and worked hard. I work to give my children a good education." Hassan gets a job with Layla Peak Expedition. He is a porter, a cargo carrier in the mountains. His experience is limited to trekking around K2 and Mount Spantik. He has never climbed a serious altitude, never worked with fixed ropes on a technical route. In the summer of 2023, Alex Abramov, the head of the Russian company 7 Summits Club, asks Layla Peak to provide 3 porters for the rope-fixing team on K2. This is a team of 15 people who go first, laying and securing ropes for everyone else. 14 of them are experienced Nepali Sherpas. The 15th is Muhammad Hassan. The company does not provide him with proper gear. Hassan has no high-altitude down suit, no helmet, no supplemental oxygen. Between Camp 2 and Camp 3, he climbs in regular pants and a jacket. He has no insurance either. Nobody making the decisions asks whether this man is ready for what awaits him above 8,000 meters. On July 27, 2023, the only weather window of the season opens on K2. About 200 climbers leave Camp 3 in the darkness of night. Ahead of everyone is the rope-fixing team. They are opening the route above 8,000 meters, installing fixed lines that everyone else holds onto. Hassan walks among fully equipped Sherpas. They have down suits, oxygen masks, helmets, gloves. Hassan has a regular jacket, bare hands, and no oxygen. The difference is visible with every step, but at altitude, there is nobody to notice it. By 2:30 in the morning, the team reaches the traverse, a narrow path that crosses the slope at roughly 8,200 meters. Directly overhead looms a serac, a block of ice the size of a multi-story building that could collapse at any moment. This is the bottleneck of K2, one of the most dangerous places on the planet. You cannot linger here. Hassan is completely exhausted from the climb. On the traverse, he loses his footing. His body slides and falls 5 to 7 meters before the rope goes taut. Hassan hangs upside down on the fixed line. During the fall, his oxygen mask is ripped off. His clothing tears. His stomach is exposed, no gloves. The temperature at this altitude is well below -30. Behind him is a line of dozens of climbers who cannot pass. The queue builds up behind him. Nobody knows what to do. At this altitude, any extra effort costs enormous resources. Up here, even simple breathing requires willpower. People stand, wait, watch. 20 minutes pass, 30, 40. Some begin to bypass the hanging Hassan, feeling their way along the slope. They continue their ascent. After an hour, Halung Dorchi Sherpa from the company 8K Expeditions reaches Hassan. He pulls him back onto the traverse. Hassan lies on the path. He is still alive. He is crying. But he cannot stand. His harness has shifted. His body barely responds. The cold is already doing its work. Hands without gloves, no oxygen. At 8,200 meters, the body loses its ability to maintain temperature within minutes. Climbers pass Hassan one by one. They step over or walk around the lying body. The stream does not stop. For most of them, the summit of K2 is still ahead, and they have no intention of giving it up. In this stream, a team of 3 appears: Norwegian climber Kristin Harila, her Nepali guide Tenjin Lama Sherpa, and Brazilian photographer Gabriel Tarso. For Harila, K2 is the final summit in a race for the record. All 14 8,000ers in the world in 92 days. They see Hassan lying on the traverse. Tarso stops. He assesses the situation and makes a decision that at this altitude costs energy, time, and possibly the chance at the summit. From whatever materials he has, he builds an improvised rescue system: 3 anchors, a rope, a pulley. 45 minutes go into flipping Hassan over and getting him upright. Tarso gives him hot water, shares his own oxygen, tries to warm the frostbitten hands that have no gloves. All of this at 8,200 meters, in a zone where your own body shuts down with every passing hour. While Tarso works, the stream of climbers continues moving past them. Dozens of people walk around the lying man, and the one leaning over him without slowing down. One of them utters a phrase that will later make headlines around the world. "Excuse me, could you move so I can pass?" High above them, a drone operated by Philip Flemig from the Austrian TV channel Service TV captures this scene from above. A procession of people skirting a motionless body on a narrow path. Hassan stops responding. His eyes close. His body no longer reacts to water, oxygen, or voice. By estimates, about 3 hours pass since the fall. Throughout this entire time, people cross the traverse. By various counts, between 50 and 150 people. The exact number will remain a matter of debate. Harila's team receives a call from the rope-fixing group working higher on the route and continues the ascent. By this point, Hassan is most likely already dead. His body lies on the traverse beneath the serac, in a place where lingering is dangerous even for a minute. That day, dozens of people reach the summit of K2. Among them are Kristin Harila and Tenjin Sherpa, who complete the record series of 14 8,000ers in 92 days. The record is officially logged. One of the climbers who returned to camp that day would later say, "A man died before my eyes. Just moments ago, he was alive, and on the way back, we had to step over his body on the icy ledge." The body of Muhammad Hassan Shigri remains at 8,200 meters. Nobody brings him down. A few days later, footage shot by Philip Flemig's drone appears on the internet. The video is filmed from above, a narrow white strip of the traverse. On it, a motionless figure, and past it, one by one, dozens of bright dots are moving. Each dot is a person in a down suit, with an oxygen mask, with a dream of the summit. They walk around the lying figure and continue on. The footage goes viral. The reaction is a wave of outrage around the world. Harila's record drowns in scandal. The main question millions are asking: why did nobody help? The government of Gilgit-Baltistan establishes an investigative commission. The investigation concludes in September 2023. The official finding: the death of Mohammed Hassan was an accident. Kristen Harila and Tenjin Sherpa are fully cleared. The commission concludes that even with assistance, Hassan most likely would not have survived. Gabriel Tarso receives a letter of appreciation for his rescue attempt. The main blow falls on Layla Peak expedition. The company violated the rules on every count. It hired an inexperienced porter, failed to provide gear, did not arrange insurance. It is banned from operating in Pakistan for 2 years. Meanwhile, Hassan's family receives neither an insurance payout nor compensation. His widow is left with 3 sons in the village of Tisar. After the expedition, Austrian climber Willi Steindl and cameraman Philipp Flemig travel to Tisar. They visit Hassan's family and deliver money collected among climbers. In October 2023, Service TV releases a documentary called Shame on K2. In it, the voices of high-altitude mountaineering legends are heard: Gerlinde Kaltenbrunner and Hans Kammerlander. The film cements Hassan's story as a symbol of the moral catastrophe in commercial mountaineering, but Hassan's body still remains on the mountain. For an entire year, it lies on the traverse, frozen into ice at 8,200 meters. Everyone heading for the summit of K2 the following season passes by it. In July 2024, Pakistani climber Naila Kiani, based in Dubai, organizes a retrieval mission. Hassan's family reaches out to her for help. Kiani assembles a team of 5 climbers, all from the Sadpara family, a dynasty of high-altitude mountaineers. They climb to the bottleneck, dig the body out of its icy shell, and over 48 hours lower it to advanced base camp. On July 31st, a helicopter picks up the body and delivers it to Dasu, a small town near his home village. 1 year after his death on K2, Muhammad Hassan Shigri finally comes home. K2, August 2010, altitude 8,300 meters. Swedish skier Fredrik Eriksson is climbing through the bottleneck with skis strapped to his back. He is about to attempt the first ever ski descent from the summit. A year earlier, on this same mountain, his partner Michel Fay fell to his death, plummeting 1,000 meters during an acclimatization descent. Eriksson came back to finish the dream for both of them. In a few seconds, he will fly down the same slope. 2 friends, 1 mountain, 1 dream, and both in the ground. To understand how this happened twice, we need to start from the very beginning. Fredrik Eriksson was born in 1975 in Sundsvall, Sweden, and grew up in Umeå, a small city in northern Sweden, where winters are long and snow becomes part of life from the very first steps. By the age of 25, he moved to Chamonix, the capital of extreme skiing, where steep couloirs and glaciers replaced the Swedish flatlands. Eriksson quickly stood out among extreme athletes. He was drawn not to groomed ski slopes, but to places where snow lies above the clouds, the flanks of 7 and 8,000ers. In 2004, he did something no Swede had done before. He climbed to the summit of Shishapangma in Tibet and skied down from 8,027 meters to the 5,600-meter mark. It was his first 8,000er. Then came more. In 2005, with a Norwegian partner, he skied down Gasherbrum 2, 8,035 meters. In the Karakoram, he also skied Chogalisa and Layla Peak. In 2007, Eriksson tackled Dhaulagiri, the 7th highest 8,000er. Avalanche-prone snow stopped him at 8,000 meters, but from there, he skied 3 vertical kilometers down to base camp. By 2008, Eriksson had hatched a plan unlike anything in the history of ski mountaineering. He called it Ski the Big Three, the first ever ski descents from the 3 highest summits on the planet: Everest, K2, and Kanchenjunga. K2 was first on the list. In the summer of 2009, he planned to arrive at the foot of the Savage Mountain and do what no one before him had managed: But for K2, he needed a partner, someone with the same madness in their eyes and the same level of skill. Ericsson found him in Michel Fait, a 44-year-old Italian from Trentino who had worked his way from sport climber to high-altitude skier. Fait started on rock. He became an instructor for the Italian Federation of Sport Climbing, but soon realized he was drawn not upward, but downward. In the mid-90s, he first strapped on crampons and clicked into ski bindings on a steep slope. From that moment, rock took a back seat. He called himself an alpinist in reverse. For him, the summit was just the starting point, and the real thing began when he pointed his skis downhill. A trip to the Himalayas in 1998 permanently set the course of his life. Fait climbed Gasherbrum II and Shisha Pangma, the same 8,000ers Ericsson would later visit. In 2007, Fait arrived at K2 for the first time with the K2 Freedom Expedition. He climbed to 8,300 meters, the threshold of the bottleneck, and turned back. On that expedition, he lost a partner, but it did not push him away from the mountain. On the contrary, K2 pulled him in even harder. When Fait and Ericsson joined forces, their plan was simple and impossible at the same time. Climb K2 via the season route, the south-southeast ridge, in alpine style, without supplemental oxygen, then ski down from the summit. If it worked, it would be the first complete ski descent from K2 in history. No one had ever come close to pulling off anything like it. Summer of 2009, the foot of K2. Ericsson and Fait were working the season route, building acclimatization before the decisive push. On June 23rd, both climbed to Camp 2 at roughly 6,400 meters. Now they needed to ski down, a standard acclimatization procedure for ski mountaineers. Check the snow, feel out the slope, let the body memorize the terrain. Fait went first. He executed a jump turn, the standard technique on steep terrain, where a skier jumps and swings the skis around in midair to control speed, but under the snow was ice. The edges, the metal strips along the sides of the skis, would not grip. The skis slipped, struck rocks, and Fait was launched off the wall. His body tumbled down the south-southeast ridge, roughly 1,000 meters to the base of the face. Ericsson saw everything. He was standing above, watching his partner, the man he shared a dream with, vanish below. It took him 20 minutes to descend to the body. When he reached it, he knew there was nothing to be done. Fait had died instantly. Evening came, and avalanche danger made it impossible to recover the body. Ericsson spent the night knowing his friend lay on the slope below. It was the longest night of his life on a mountain, and his and Feit's last night together at K2. The next morning, Ericsson, a guide, and 8 other climbers descended to Feit's body. They stood in silence, a minute that held within it 4 years of shared plans, expeditions, and conversations about what it would be like when they finally stood on skis at the summit of K2. Then they wrapped the body and buried him right there, at the foot of the mountain that had drawn him in. Ericsson lost all desire to continue. He called off the expedition and went home. But the dream of K2 would not let go. By 2010, Ericsson found a new partner, American Trey Cook, and began preparing for a second attempt. This time they chose a different route, the classic Abruzzi along the southeast ridge. The goal was the same, reach the summit and ski down. Ericsson wanted to finish what he and Fait had started. Planet Mountain would later write that the dream had consumed him so completely, he simply could not walk away from it. August 6th, 2010, 1:30 in the morning, Camp 4 at 8,000 meters. 3 people emerged from the tents, Ericsson, Cook, and Gerlinde Kaltenbrunner, an Austrian mountaineer attempting K2 without oxygen on her own program. The expedition's weather consultant, Karl Gobel from Innsbruck, had promised that wind would die down and visibility would improve as the day went on. But for now, bitter wind and a milky haze all around. They climbed in darkness, gaining altitude meter by meter. By 6:30 in the morning, the trio reached the base of the bottleneck, a narrow, steep couloir between 8,200 and 8,300 meters, the crux of the Abruzzi route. Here there is steep ice, overhanging seracs, and thousands of meters of void beneath your feet. Cook had a problem. Several weeks earlier, while establishing Camp 3, he had frostbitten his hands. Now, approaching the bottleneck, his fingers were failing again. Cook made the decision to turn back. He said goodbye to Ericsson and began descending to Camp 4. By 7 in the morning, Kaltenbrunner radioed in. Only two were continuing, she and Ericsson. Visibility was still poor. The wind had not let up. Ericsson went first, unroped. On his back, a pack with skis lashed to it. The very skis he was here for. He entered the bottleneck, climbing steep ice and deep snow toward a rocky outcrop to the right of the main couloir. Ericsson stopped on the rocky outcrop. Altitude, roughly 8,300 meters. Kaltenbrunner was slightly below. He wanted to hammer in a piton to set up an anchor point. He stood in deep snow, working with hardware. At about 8:10 in the morning, something went wrong. One account says a rock broke loose under his tool and knocked him off his stance. Another says he simply lost his balance in the deep, loose snow and could not self-arrest, drive the ice axe into the slope, and stop the slide. The result was the same. Kaltenbrunner watched Ericsson shoot past her, downward. His body slid, picking up speed along the icy couloir, and disappeared into the white haze of the slope. Ericsson's body came to rest at roughly 7,000 meters, on a vast slope that was impossible to reach without lethal risk. Kaltenbrunner called off her summit attempt and began descending. On the way down, she found one of Ericsson's skis, the only item that had separated from his pack during the fall. The second ski stayed with him. Trey Cook, who had turned back several hours earlier, had already descended below. He learned of his partner's death over the radio. At 4 in the afternoon, Ericsson's father in Sweden made a decision. He asked that no attempt be made to recover the body. Let his son remain where he was happiest, with a view of Chogalisa and Leila Peak, the summits Ericsson had once skied. Michel Fayet lies at the foot of K2, buried by his companions in June of 2009. Fredrik Ericsson rests on the slope of the same mountain, at 7,000 meters, since August of 2010. Two partners united by one dream. Both fell on this mountain. Both remain on K2 forever. In 2018, Polish mountaineer Andrzej Bargiel climbed to the summit of K2 and skied down to base camp in 7 hours. The first complete ski descent from K2, the very thing Ericsson and Fate gave their lives for, was accomplished 8 years after their deaths. In 1988, he was dragged 500 meters down the face of Makalu and survived. In 2018, he fell 400 meters on Broad Peak and spent a day and a half alone on the slope, found with the help of a drone. Twice Rick Allen was given up for dead, and twice he came back. On the 25th of July, 2021, the 66-year-old Scotsman set out on the east face of K2, aiming to climb a route that didn't yet exist. At 9:30 in the morning, the slope began to move. This is the story of a man the mountains gave 2 chances, and what happened when there was no third. Richard Frank Allen was born on the 6th of November, 1954, in Scotland. While still a boy, his father took him up Schiehallion and Ben Nevis, and the mountains entered his life before he even realized it. In 1973, Rick enrolled in chemical engineering at the University of Birmingham, and on his very first day at the Mountaineering Club, he knew this was it. He'd later say, "One day was enough to know. This is what I want to do." After graduating, he took an engineering job in the oil and gas industry. Aberdeen, the North Sea, companies like Texaco and Chevron. Steady work, good pay. But every pound Rick earned went not toward a house or a car, but toward flights to Kathmandu and Islamabad. His mentors, Scottish climbers Con Higgins and Mick Geddes, taught him technique, but Rick's ambitions were his own. By the mid-'80s, he'd completed the first winter ascent of Raven's Edge in Glencoe, one of the highest difficulty grades, 5 pitches up an ice-coated crag. That same year, 1984, he summited Ganesh Himal II in Nepal, 7,043 meters, via the West Ridge, in alpine style, a light pack, no siege tactics, no porters above base camp. This would become his calling card for the next 4 decades. It was then that his creed took shape. New routes, clean style, minimal gear. His longtime partner Sandy Allen would later sum him up neatly. He lived like a tiger, not like a man. This tiger, however, found himself on the edge more than once. In 1988, Rick joined a British expedition to the west face of Makalu, an 8,000er in eastern Nepal, one of the most technically demanding. His partner on the route was Alan Hinkes, the future only Briton to summit all 14 8,000ers. On the wall, an avalanche hit them. The mass of snow caught both climbers and dragged them roughly 500 meters down the slope. When the sliding stopped, Hinkes saw Rick, battered, barely conscious. Hinkes was certain his partner wouldn't make it, but Rick opened his eyes, moved his split lips, and said, "I'm not dead yet." The injuries turned out to be severe, but not fatal. He recovered, and didn't just recover, he came back with even bigger plans. In 1993, he put up a new route on the north face of Dhaulagiri. In 2000, he summited Everest via the classic Southeast Ridge, becoming the 960th person on top of the world. For Rick, Everest wasn't the ultimate goal, more of a waypoint in a long game. What drew him wasn't altitude itself, but unclimbed lines on faces that others considered impossible. By 2012, he had about a dozen such lines behind him, 4 8,000ers, dozens of expeditions in the Himalayas and the Karakoram. But one route haunted him, the Mazeno Ridge on Nanga Parbat. 13 kilometers of sharp crest above 7,000 meters, with drops, cornices, and stretches where there was nowhere to pitch a tent. It was called the last great unclimbed route in the Himalayas. Dozens of expeditions had attempted it since the 1970s. None had reached the summit. Rick and Sandy Allen assembled a team of 6, the 2 of them, South African Cathy O'Dowd, and 3 Sherpas. They set out on the ridge and began a multi-day traverse. Day after day they pushed along the crest, sleeping on tiny platforms hacked out of the snow. After several days, O'Dowd and the Sherpas decided to bail. Too long, too grueling. They descended the Diamir face. Rick and Sandy stayed. They kept going. On the 15th of July, on the 18th day, the 2 Scotsmen stood on the summit of Nanga Parbat, 8,126 meters. No oxygen, no support, alpine style. They descended the Kinshofar route. In 2013, they received the Palais d'Or for this climb, the highest honor in world mountaineering. Rick was 57. Most climbers at that age have already retired. Rick was just getting started. 5 years later, that momentum brought him to Broad Peak, an 8,000er in the Karakoram, right next to K2. July 2018. Rick was 63. He arrived with a team, Sandy Allen, Kasper Tekieli, Stanislav Verba, and once again set his sights on a new route up a steep ice section. On the 9th of July, he headed up alone for a solo attempt. He climbed all day and all night. What happened next isn't entirely clear. Most likely, a fall on a steep ice section. Rick didn't come back. The team waited. No radio contact. A full day passed. Sandy Allen and the others concluded Rick was dead. On the 10th of July, the cook of a Japanese expedition camped on Broad Peak, looked through a spotting scope at the slope, and noticed something that looked like a backpack at around 7,000 meters. The backpack started moving. Sandy Allen contacted Bartek Bargiel, a Polish drone operator stationed at K2 base camp, preparing to film his brother Andrei's ski descent from the summit. Bartek launched a DJI Mavic Pro and aimed it at Broad Peak. The drone's camera found Rick alive at approximately 7,200 meters. He'd fallen roughly 400 meters from 7,600. Climbers David Roski and Frederick Strang left Camp 3 and reached him by 7:30 in the evening. Rick had spent more than 36 hours alone on the slope. Cuts, frostbitten fingers, and nothing more. 2 days later, he walked down to base camp on his own 2 feet. The man who survived Makalu and came back from Broad Peak had no intention of stopping. In 2021, Rick planned an expedition to K2, 8,611 meters, the second highest and arguably the most dangerous mountain on Earth. He was 66. His partner was longtime friend Jerry Gore, a 60-year-old Briton with type 1 diabetes. Officially, the expedition was charitable. Rick raised £10,000 for Partners Relief and Development, an organization helping refugees from Myanmar. But the real driving force was something else. Rick was consumed by the idea of a new route on the east face of K2 in pure alpine style. Jerry Gore would later say, Rick was on fire for the potential new route on K2, the mountain of mountains. On the 14th of June, they flew to Pakistan. On the 21st, they began the trek to base camp. Weeks went to acclimatization. ascending and descending, adjusting to the thin air. At base camp, Rick found partners for his route: Spanish mountain guide Jordi Tosas and Austrian guide Stefan Keck, both IFMGA certified. Jerry planned a different path, the standard Abruzzi route with Pakistani guide Ishaq Ali. Friends parted ways for different routes on the same mountain. On the 25th of July, 2021, Rick, Jordi, and Stefan set out on the east face of K2. Morning, they gained altitude. At 9:30, the slope above them began to move. The first avalanche crashed down the wall. Rick took the full impact. By all accounts, he died instantly. Within minutes, a second avalanche tore his body from the wall and carried it downward, then a third, then a fourth. 4 avalanches in a short span of time. The wall seemed to shed everything off itself. Jordi Tosas and Stefan Keck somehow survived. They were evacuated by helicopter to Skardu. Down at base camp, Jerry Gore learned what had happened. He didn't wait for morning. At midnight, Jerry set out toward the wall with Ishaq Ali and 5 other Pakistani high-altitude guides. 7 men walked through the darkness of a Karakoram night, across the glacier, to the foot of the wall. They found Rick's body. The man who, 33 years earlier, had said, "I'm not dead yet," after a 500-meter fall on Makalu, who 3 years before had returned from 36 hours of solitude on Broad Peak, this time did not get up. On the 26th of July, the team buried Rick near the advanced base camp of K2. Expedition manager Mirza Ali canceled the entire program. Jerry Gore never set foot on the route. Less than 3 days after Rick's death, 20 climbers summited K2 via the Abruzzi route, the very path Jerry had planned to take. The mountain stays the same. It lets some through and takes others, and there's no logic to it. Jerry would later write, "Rick embodied humanity in its most humble, kind, and gentle form." Over 4 decades in the mountains, Rick Allen put up dozens of new routes, summited 6 8,000ers, was twice given up for dead, and twice came back. He didn't choose standard paths, didn't climb with large teams, didn't use oxygen. He chose what was hardest, cleanest, and most honest. In 2024, the Alpine Club of Great Britain established the Rick Allen Skills Award, a prize in his memory. His name now stands for a Mastery Award. He probably would have preferred one more unclimbed ridge. On the 20th of July, 2007, Stefano Zavka stands on the summit of K2. He is 35 years old. 3 years ago, he turned back just 400 meters from this very point. Now, the dream is fulfilled, but it is 6:30 in the evening. The sun is already touching the horizon, and ahead lies a night descent through the bottleneck. A second climber moves ahead. Zavka stays behind, alone. The last thing anyone sees is the light of his headlamp moving through the darkness. And then the light goes out. What happened on the night route of K2? And why did no one go looking for the mountain guide from a small Italian town? Terni is a small city in the heart of Umbria, far from the Great Alps and Himalayan peaks. It is here, in 1972, that Stefano Zavka is born. At 17, he signs up for a mountaineering course at the local chapter of the Club Alpino Italiano, and the mountains consume him completely. Zavka does not just take up climbing as a hobby. He makes it his profession and becomes the first certified mountain guide in the entire Umbria region. He leads routes in the Dolomites and works in the Monte Sibillini National Park. But alongside his guiding work, Zavka builds his own alpine career, and that path leads him ever higher. In 2004, he travels to K2 for the first time, the second highest peak on the planet, 8,611 meters. The expedition, K2 2004, 50 years later, brings together 19 participants. Conditions are brutal, and only 5 reach the summit. Zavka is not among them. He turns back just 400 meters from the goal. 400 meters is a distance you walk in 5 minutes in everyday life. Above 8,000 meters, it can cost you everything. Zavka descends. But the summit of K2 stays inside him, like an unanswered question. 3 years later, that question brings him back. In 2007, Zavka joins the K2 Freedom Expedition, organized by a young Italian alpinist named Daniele Nardi. The team is small. Nardi himself is the leader, experienced high-altitude climber Mario Vielmo, Zavka, and Michel Fay. The route is the classic Abruzzi spur along the southeast ridge, the same one the Italians used when they first conquered K2 in 1954. But this expedition has a special feature. Italian state television RAI sends a film crew to the mountain, led by journalist Marco Mazzocchi. The cameras capture everything: the arrival in Islamabad, the drive across Pakistan, the trek along the Baltoro Glacier to base camp at 5,100 meters. Coordination from base camp is handled by Mazzocchi and Claudio Tesserolo, neither of whom is a climber. That same season, teams from Russia, South Korea, the United States, the Czech Republic, and other countries are also working on K2. The 20th of July is expected to be the day of a mass summit push via the Abruzzi route. Several teams prepare to leave Camp 4 at the same time. The Italians plan to depart as well, but they start 3 hours behind schedule. That delay stretches an already long climb even further. The Russians, Koreans, and Americans are already high on the route when the Italian foursome is just beginning the ascent from Camp 4. Nardi, the fastest in the group, soon pulls ahead. He picks up the pace and breaks away from his partners. Around 3:30 in the afternoon local time, Nardi stands on the summit of K2. Behind him, the road is empty. Michel Fay has already decided to turn back by this point. He stopped 500 meters from the goal, his strength depleted, and turned around toward Camp 4. Zavka and Vielmo continue as a pair. Nardi begins his descent and meets them roughly 150 meters below the summit. Zavka smiles. "Half an hour and I'll be on top," he says. Nardi does not give the order to turn around. He continues his descent. The hour is already late. The sun is sinking below the horizon, but the two climbers keep pushing upward. By this time, the first tragedy of the day has already struck on the route. Sherpa Nima Nurbu from the Korean team fell in the bottleneck during the early stage of the ascent and died. The mountain has already claimed its first victim, and Zavka and Vielmo are still climbing. Around 6:30 in the evening local time, Zavka and Vielmo finally stand on the highest point of K2, 8,611 meters. For Zavka, this is the culmination of a 3-year journey. Now he is here. A little earlier, still on the ascent through the bottleneck, American climber Don Bowie, descending in the opposite direction, managed to photograph both Italians. That photograph will become one of the last pieces of evidence that Zavka was alive. But reaching the summit at 6:30 is already critically late. Simone Moro, one of the most respected Italian high-altitude mountaineers, will later say it plainly. Reaching the summit at that hour is a conscious choice, not an accident. Zavka and Vielmo begin their descent. Both have frostbite. Vielmo's right hand and the big toe of his left foot. They descend through the bottleneck, one of the most dangerous sections of K2, a steep ice couloir beneath overhanging seracs. Darkness falls quickly. Zavka slows down and tells Vielmo to go ahead. They separate. From this moment on, each of them is on his own on the night route. And there is one critical detail. Zavka has no radio. The expedition did not have enough for every member. Vielmo descends through the bottleneck and glances back from time to time. Behind him, in the darkness, he sees the light of a headlamp. The light is moving, which means Zavka is descending. That is reassuring. But the wind picks up rapidly, 80 kilometers per hour and more. Snow lashes his face, burns his eyes. Visibility drops to 0. Vielmo exits the bottleneck onto the plateau before Camp 4 and loses his bearings. He does not know which way to go. Whiteout conditions all around, night, wind knocking him off his feet. But Vielmo has a radio. He contacts Nardi, who is already in the tent at Camp 4. Nardi places a lamp outside. Vielmo sees the light and follows it. The radio saves his life. He stumbles into the tent, nearly frozen, with frostbitten extremities. And he utters the words that mark the beginning of the wait. "Stefano is behind me. He should be here in about 10 minutes. 10 minutes pass, 30, an hour. Wind batters the tent. No one appears at the entrance. Stefano Zavka does not come. And there is no way to reach him because he has no radio. The storm does not let up. Wind tears at the tent fabric. Snow buries everything around. Nardi will later say that going outside was physically impossible, that the wind would simply blow a person away. Inside the tent at Camp 4, 3 climbers wait and can do nothing. At 11:07 in the evening, the last radio contact with Vielmo takes place. After that, silence. The night passes with no word. On the morning of the 21st of July at 8:20, Nardi transmits the first message. Stefano did not return to the tent during the night. But this message does not reach base camp until 6:45 in the evening, 20 hours after the last contact with Vielmo. Why the signal took more than 10 hours is not precisely known. Either the communication equipment failed or the intermediate camps did not relay the call. 20 hours, and during that time, no one at base camp asked for confirmation that everyone had returned. Coordinators Tesserolo and Mazzocchi were not climbers and, according to available accounts, simply assumed the group was safe. When the information finally comes through, the decision has already been made. The team descends. No search operation is organized. No one climbs up to Camp 4. No one looks for Zavka. His body has not been found to this day. Exactly where he stopped, fell, or lost consciousness that night remains unknown. The last thing anyone saw was the light of his headlamp, moving through the darkness. 3 months after Zavka's disappearance, RAI releases a documentary film called K2 Il Sogno L'Incubo, meaning K2, the dream, the nightmare. 2 episodes air on RAI due in October of 2007. The film is screened at the Trento Film Festival, and it provokes a fierce reaction in the Italian mountaineering community. Questions come one after another. Why did Nardi make a solo push for the summit, leaving the entire team behind? Why did he not give the order to turn back when the hour was already critical? Why was Zavka descending without a radio? Why did the team retreat to base camp without even attempting a search? Chris Warner, an American climber who summited K2 that same day, visits Zavka's family in Terni after the expedition. He sees the grief of a family that never received answers. Warner calls what happened a preventable death. When he asks Nardi why Stefano was left alone on the mountain, Nardi replies, "Above 8,000 meters, everyone is on their own." Zavka's family and friends establish an association bearing his name in Terni. The local chapter of the Club Alpino Italiano now carries the name of Stefano Zavka, and the summit of K2, where he stood on that July evening, never gave him back. K2, July 26, 2013. Every other climber on the mountain is heading down. The Sherpas have warned that staying any higher is a death sentence. Everyone retreats, except 2. Marty Schmidt, one of the strongest guides on the planet. 29 ascents of Denali, 5 8,000ers without supplemental oxygen, is leading his 25-year-old son toward Camp 3 at 7,200 meters. For Denali, who has just graduated from art school, K2 will be only his second 8,000er ever. They push through waist-deep snow, and by evening, they radio in. They've made it. That is the last anyone will hear from them. Marty Schmidt was a New Zealander by birth, raised in the United States. He started his path in the mountains as a teenager. By 15, he was already leading groups along the ridges of the Sierra Nevada in California. At 20, he enlisted in the U.S. Air Force and passed selection for pararescue, one of the most elite rescue units in the American military. He was trained to parachute into disaster zones and deliver aid in conditions where no ordinary team could function. In the Philippines, he received an Air Force medal for rescuing people from a burning hotel. In Alaska, he climbed Denali for the first time, the mountain that would become his calling card. After the military, Schmidt turned the mountains into a profession. He founded his own guiding company, MSIG, and worked all over the world: Alaska, the Andes, Europe, the Himalayas. Over his career, he summited Denali 29 times, Aconcagua 34, 5 8,000ers, Kangchenjunga, Cho Oyu, Makalu, both Gasherbrums. On principle, without oxygen and without high-altitude porters above base camp. He moved light, fast, on his own terms. On Makalu in 2010, there was an episode that says more about Marty than any list of summits. He was nearly at the top when he learned that 3 Ukrainian climbers were stranded above 8,000 meters. Schmidt descended through the night to reach them from 8,100 meters, helped all 3 get back to a tent, and then turned around, climbed back up, and by 3 in the afternoon stood on the summit of Makalu, the 3rd New Zealander on that mountain and the 1st without oxygen. But one mountain kept eluding him: K2. In 1992, failure. In 2000, a push to 8,350 meters via the North Ridge, winds of 160 kilometers per hour, retreat. K2 became what Marty's ex-wife and Denali's mother, Joanne Munisteri, would later call his Moby Dick, a goal he could never abandon. In 2013, at 53, Schmidt arrived in the Karakoram for his third attempt. This time, his son was with him. His name was Denali, after that very mountain in Alaska, where Marty had once launched his great career. The boy was born in 1988 in the small town of McVille in Australia, and grew up between three countries, Australia, New Zealand, and the United States. His father was constantly on expeditions. From an early age, Denali got used to the idea that his dad would leave for the mountains and might not come back for months. But Denali himself was drawn not to mountains, but to canvases. He had been drawing since the age when other boys were kicking balls. In May 2013, he graduated from California College of the Arts, second in his class. His painting was described as intuitive expression, work that carried the same energy as his father's ascents, just channeled differently. That fall, he was planning to go to Berlin, to art school. Life, it seemed, was unfolding on his own terms. But there was a second thread. Denali was physically strong. He worked as a ski patroller at Bear Valley, California. He climbed Denali with his father in 2011 and 2012, and together they forged a new route called Dad and Son on the southwest face. They were a powerful team. The father brought experience and raw power. The son brought youth and endurance. Later, after the tragedy, Joanne would tell a different version. According to her, her son never wanted a climbing career and openly clashed with his father over it. Denali wanted to teach art, not storm 8,000ers. But Chris Warner, the Schmidt's expedition partner on K2, would later say the opposite. Both were in the same mindset. One wasn't convincing the other. Both wanted to go. What exactly Denali felt as he headed for the Karakoram that summer remains a question without a definitive answer. One thing is known. In the summer of 2013, he traveled with his father to Broad Peak in K2. The first objective in the Karakoram was Broad Peak, 8,051 meters. For Marty, it was a warm-up before K2. For Denali, it was his first 8,000er. In July 2013, father and son summited together. They became the first father-son pair to stand on Broad Peak at the same time, a moment worthy of headlines. Marty was satisfied. The plan was working, the team was tested, acclimatization was on schedule. But immediately after the descent, a different story began. 3 young climbers went missing on the way down from Broad Peak. They had strayed off route, taken the wrong ridge, and become stranded above Camp 3 at around 7,700 meters. A zone nearly impossible to reach from below. Marty and Denali joined the rescue operation alongside Swiss climber Mike Horn. Days of searching, ascents, attempts to make radio contact, scouring the slopes. No result. On July 22nd, all 3 were declared dead. For Marty and Denali, this was not just a failed rescue mission. It was several days at altitude, physical and emotional strain right after summiting an 8,000er. There was no time left for proper rest. Ahead of them lay K2, Marty's third attempt, Denali's first and only. They turned to face the most dangerous mountain on Earth. K2 at the end of July 2013 looked inhospitable. Deep snow buried the route. Around 20 climbers from several expeditions were working on the mountain. Marty, Denali, and their partner, Chris Warner, climbed to Camp 2. But with every passing hour, the situation deteriorated. Snow kept accumulating. The expedition's Sherpas issued a warning. Conditions were too dangerous to continue upward. The avalanche risk was critical. Every other expedition reached the same conclusion. Down to base camp. On the morning of July 26th, Chris Warner also decided to descend. He would later write that the deep snow on the route had convinced him. Now was not the time. He suggested Marty and Denali come down with him. Marty refused. He and Denali continued climbing toward Camp 3 at 7,200 meters. Just the 2 of them, the only people on the entire mountain above base camp. Every step was knee-deep, waist-deep in loose snow. The load on the slope was enormous, but Marty kept going up. He knew this mountain. He was certain he could handle it. By the evening of July 26th, Marty and Denali reached Camp 3. From the camp at 7,200 meters, Marty radioed in. He reported to base camp. They had arrived. They had fought through deep snow, but the tent was up and they were inside. His voice was calm. Marty expressed no alarm. He had done this hundreds of times, pitched a tent at altitude, waited out bad weather, planned the next move. Those are the last confirmed words of Marty Schmidt. The morning of July 27th, time for the scheduled radio check-in. Marty does not come on the air. Base camp waits. An hour passes, then 2. Silence. The evening check-in, silence again. On July 28th, tension in base camp escalates. Chris Warner makes a decision. He asks 2 Sherpas still at Camp 2 to climb up to Camp 3 and find out what is happening. The Sherpas agree and begin the ascent. The climb from Camp 2 to Camp 3 takes hours. The Sherpas follow the same route that Marty and Denali had taken 2 days earlier. They know what they are looking for. A tent at 7,200 meters, 2 climbers who stopped answering. By the evening of July 28th, the Sherpas reach the spot where Camp 3 had stood. There is no tent, no gear, no people. The slope is clean, as if no camp had ever existed there. A massive avalanche had swept through the site and erased everything. A wall of snow had buried the tent where Marty and Denali were sleeping and carried them down the slope. By all indications, the avalanche struck on the night of July the 26th to 27th, the very night Marty had last made radio contact. Father and son most likely died in their sleep, with no time to do anything at all. On July 29th, 2013, Sequoia Schmidt, Marty's daughter and Denali's sister, confirmed their deaths. The bodies were never found. The mountain took them both without a trace. There is one detail that adds yet another layer to this story. Had the other climbers not decided to descend on the morning of July 26th, some of them would have spent that night in the same Camp 3, under the same avalanche. Marty's decision to stay cost 2 lives. Everyone else's decision to leave saved theirs. Marty Schmidt was 53 years old. Denali was 25. K2 remained unconquered in the 2013 season. Not a single expedition reached the summit. 2 years later, in 2015, Sequoia Schmidt traveled to Pakistan. She made it to K2 base camp, alone, with a few local guides. She was 24. She did not go there to climb. She went to say goodbye, to see the mountain that had taken her father and her brother, to stand at its foot and leave. That journey became a book. Journey of Heart, A Sojourn to K2, a finalist for the International Book Award in 2016. In memory of her brother, Sequoia created the Denali Foundation, a fund that supplies art materials to schools where kids have no access to art classes, exactly what Denali had wanted to do. Joanne did not stay silent either. She publicly challenged the narrative that had formed in the media after the tragedy, the image of a great mountaineering dynasty, a father and son storming the highest peaks on the planet together. According to Joanne, Denali was an artist, not a climber. He should never have been on K2. He went because he could not leave his father alone. The Schmidt tragedy has become one of those cases people study when they talk about summit fever, the obsession with the top that drowns out every warning sign. The Sherpas warned them. Their partners descended. The entire mountain emptied. But Marty kept going up. He knew K2 better than most people on the planet. He believed his experience was enough. The mountain proved otherwise. The west face of K2, 2,600 meters of sheer ice and rock. In the entire history of mountaineering, only one team has ever climbed it. 15 Russians, 10 weeks, siege style. In July 2024, 2 people stepped onto that wall, Kazuya Hiride and Kenro Nakajima. A record number of golden ice axes between them. A rope team many called the strongest in the world. Pure alpine style. No fixed ropes, no oxygen, no camps. On the 4th day, communication went silent. A helicopter found 2 bodies at 7,500 meters. That same day, on the other side of the mountain, a Frenchman shattered the speed record on the standard route. How did the strongest rope team on the planet end up on a wall they would never come back from? In 1984, in a small town in Nara Prefecture, a boy named Kenro Nakajima is born. His father is an amateur mountaineer. He takes his son into the mountains as soon as the boy can walk. Low hills around the house, trails through the forest, the smell of pine and earth. Nakajima will later say he barely remembers his father's face, doesn't remember his voice, but he remembers the mountain behind the house, the very one his father led him up by the hand. When Kenro is 5, his father dies. The circumstances of his death are described differently across sources, and there's no clear picture. What remains is a boy without a mentor and a mountain behind the house. Kenro grows up without teachers. In high school, he starts climbing alone. No gear, no company, no system. Serious mountaineering begins at Kwansei Gakuin University, where he joins the mountain club and for the first time finds people willing to teach him. Over the following years, Nakajima transforms into one of the strongest high-altitude climbers in Japan. Cho-Oyu, Everest, Manaslu, 6 of the 7 continental summits. At the same time, he works as a mountain guide and shoots documentary films in the mountains. In 2007, he completes the east face of Panburi Himal, his first ascent. Camera and ice axe become his 2 main tools, but the most important partnership of his life is still ahead. That partnership begins with a man who also came to the mountains by a roundabout path. Kazuya Hiraide is born in 1979 in the Nagano Valley. In school, he practices kendo, then switches to race walking, becomes a speed athlete. But the world of competition, with its rules and someone else's finish lines, quickly stops satisfying him. At university, Hiraide joins the mountain club and realizes the mountains are a place where he decides where to go. "I wanted to choose my own goals and finish lines," he will say later. In 2001, Hiraide summits the east peak of Kulakangri in Tibet, 7,381 meters. It's his first serious ascent, and it sets the direction. Big mountains, technical routes, alpine style. Soon he forms a rope team with Kei Taniguchi, one of the strongest female alpinists in Japan. Together they climb the walls of Spantik, Shivling, and Muzdagh Atta. In 2008, they make the first ascent of Kamet's southeast face, 7,756 meters in India. For that climb, they receive the Piolet d'Or, the Golden Ice Axe, the highest award in world mountaineering. Hiraide and Taniguchi become the first Japanese recipients in the history of the award, and Taniguchi becomes its first female laureate. But in December 2015, Kei Taniguchi dies on Mount Kuro in Hokkaido. Hiraide loses his partner and goes through a deep crisis. He will write, "The sudden tragedy made me question my motivation for mountaineering. After much deliberation, I decided to continue climbing, with her beside me, in spirit." He needs a new partner. Around the same time, Hiraide and Nakajima begin climbing together. The partnership comes together quickly. Both share the same approach to mountains. Pure alpine style, just the 2 of them. No oxygen, no porters, no fixed ropes. Just 2 people, their packs, and the wall. Nakajima precisely describes the division of roles. "Hiraide has more experience, while I'm stronger technically. I usually lead, and he follows behind me and watches over me." In 2017, they take on Shaispare, 7,611 meters in the Karakoram. The northeast face, 2,700 meters of vertical gain. Difficult WI 5M6. Steep ice and rock sections at high altitude. By this point, Hiraide has already tried Shaispor 3 times with different partners, and each time the mountain stopped him. Now, with Nakajima, they climb the wall in 7 days. The route is named Shukriya, thank you in Urdu. It's Hiraide's second Piolet d'Or. 2 years later, they make the first ascent of Rakaposhi's south face, 7,788 meters, 6 days on the wall, pure style. The south side of Rakaposhi had never been climbed by anyone before them. A third Golden Ice Axe. In 2022, the first ascent of the northwest face of Karanko, a mountain summited only once before them. In 6 years of working together, 4 first ascents on 7,000ers in the Karakoram and Hindu Kush. The climbing community starts calling them the strongest rope team in the world. In the summer of 2023, Hiraide and Nakajima arrive in Pakistan with a double objective. The first, the north face of Tirik Mir, 7,708 meters, the highest point of the Hindu Kush. This face has never been climbed and has barely even been scouted. The approach goes through an unnamed valley, past an icefall with unstable seracs, over a pass at 6,200 meters. Nakajima will write, "The North Face, as if surrounded by a fortress, stood in silence." I love this kind of exploratory mountaineering. They named the route Secret Line, 2,200 meters from the lower Tyrek Glacier to the summit. From the 18th to the 24th of July, they climb mostly simul-climbing, bivouac on the wall 3 times, reach the summit around 9:30 in the morning, and descend via the 1967 route on the other side of the mountain. This first ascent will earn them their 4th Joint Piolet d'Or, but the award will be given posthumously at the 2024 ceremony. The second objective of that trip is reconnaissance. Even before returning from Pakistan, Hiraide and Nakajima announced their next project, the west face of K2, 8,611 meters, the second highest peak on Earth. The west face has been climbed only once, in 2007, by a Russian team led by Viktor Kozlov. 15 climbers, 11 of whom reached the summit. Siege style, roughly 10 weeks of work, 7 intermediate camps, fixed ropes along nearly the entire wall. Without oxygen, but with the full infrastructure of a major expedition. Hiraide and Nakajima plan to do it as a team of 2. In late May 2024, Hiraide and Nakajima arrive in the Karakoram. Ahead, weeks of waiting at the base of K2. The weather is unstable, the windows are short. The plan is utterly pure. Climb the west face in a single push, alpine style, no fixed ropes, no stocked camps, no oxygen, just 2 people tied to 1 rope on a wall that no one has repeated in 17 years. On the 24th of July, at 4:30 in the morning, they start up the wall. Conditions are far from ideal, rain, icing on the lower sections, but they push on. Day after day, the team climbs higher, bivouacking on tiny ledges chopped into the ice. On the 4th day, July 27th, Hiraide contacts their sponsor, the Japanese company Ishii Sports. He reports that they plan to climb to the zone where the Russian expedition's second camp stood in 2007. This is the last thing the world will hear from them. 2 hours after that message, communication cuts out. No signal, no response. Ishii Sports waits, then raises the alarm. On July 27th, the Pakistani army dispatches 2 helicopters from Skardu toward K2. The aircraft reach the west face and begin searching. At roughly 7,500 meters, the pilots spot 2 bodies. The figures lie motionless, side by side. Landing is impossible, too high, too steep. The helicopters return to base. On July 28th, a second flyover. The bodies are in the same position, not the slightest movement. That same day, on the other side of K2, 32-year-old Frenchman Benjamin Vidranes climbs from advanced base camp at 5,350 meters to the summit in 10 hours and 59 minutes, without oxygen. He shatters the speed record for summiting K2, which had stood since 1986, cutting it by more than half. Then he opens a paraglider and descends to base camp in 30 minutes. 1 mountain, 1 day, 2 worlds. On the standard route, a man who flew up and down in a matter of hours. On the west face, 2 bodies on a route that only 1 team in the entire history of mountaineering had ever climbed. On July 29th, a 3rd flyover. The scene is unchanged. On July 30th, Ishii Sports, in consultation with both climbers' families, announces the end of the search. The terrain of the west face is too steep and too dangerous for a ground evacuation. Survival at 7,500 meters without shelter, in temperatures below -20, is impossible. The bodies of Kazuya Hiraide and Kenro Nakajima remain on the wall. The exact cause of the fall was never determined. An avalanche, a serac collapse, a cornice break, a mistake on the terrain. These are all theories, none confirmed. One thing is known. The helicopter recorded 2 bodies lying side by side. Several months after their deaths, the Piolet d'Or jury awards a 4th golden ice axe to Hiraide and a 3rd to Nakajima for the first ascent of Tyrek Meer's north face. 4 Piolets d'Or for a single climber. That is a record in the entire history of the award. There is no one left to accept it. At the ceremony, the jury dedicates a separate tribute to both of them. They were called 2 of the most important alpinists of the young century. They climbed walls that no one had climbed before them, in a style that allows no compromise. Every one of their routes, a first ascent on a 7,000 or 8,000er, just the two of them, with no safety net of civilization. Shispar, Rakaposhi, Karun Ko, Tirich Mir. The west face of K2 was supposed to be the fifth. Kenro Nakajima lost his father at 5. His father took him to the mountains. The son grew up and went into those same mountains. He found a partner with whom he shared a rope and a philosophy. They forged their own paths, never followed anyone else's. On the west face of K2, at 7,500 meters, that path came to an end. The rope team stayed a rope team until the very end.